Hello. The Divine Code reading for July 20th, pages 85 and 86. Torah study for Gentiles 2. What is delving into Torah? It is learning only for the sake of acquiring the Torah knowledge itself, which is called learning Torah for its own sake. This means a deep involvement in the study and penetrating investigative learning, pilpul in Hebrew. See below in this topic. This includes learning to deeply understand the detailed Torah laws, the deeper reasons for the commandments, or the depth of intention of the Torah words, and not for any other goal. So if a person is learning simply for the sake of learning, I know that the scripture has inherent value, and therefore I'm just looking anywhere in scripture for the sake of the inherent value, or for the sake of the divine value that's imbued in the Torah, that exists in the Torah. That's what's referred to as delving into Torah. Delving into Torah refers here to learning Torah for its own sake, and delving into the reasons for the commandments. This is likewise implied from Miri on Tractate Sanhedrin 59a, if he is involved in the Torah for its own sake of keeping the commandments, not for the sake of keeping the commandments, but only because he desires to fathom the wisdom of the written Torah and Talmud. So Miri is explaining that the person is doing this not for the purpose of doing the commandments. In the case of the Noahide does the 7 commandments. Now the Noahide can also do other commandments. There's certain rules in that involved in what a Noahide can or cannot do. So the Noahide can do that. And there's levels of Torah study available to the Noahide for that. But this is explaining the rules for that. But someone who learns for a different goal is not one who is called involved in Torah for its own sake, but rather he is learning for the sake of reward. In other words, for the sake of some benefit that he will get from the information. So there's some kind of benefit. It hasn't explained yet what the benefits are, but there's a reason why the person is going into this delving into Torah, rather than simply going into it because they're seeing it as a way to connect to God. But there's stuff in the text that the person is looking for. This difference can be seen from what Rambam writes, that the study of Torah is forbidden to a Gentile, as is the observance of a Sabbath, because of prohibition of adding a new commandment or religion. Even though the Talmud in Tractate Sanhedrin 59a says that it is tantamount to having relations to a betrothed woman or stealing from the Jews, it appears that this intention is only regarding such depth of Torah study that it is severely prohibited. more so than the general restriction that Gentiles should not take upon themselves an additional observance in the manner of a divine commandment. So there's aspects to Torah study for its own sake. There's the concern that that's taking on an extra mitzvah. If a person is doing Torah study for its own sake, why is the person doing it? He's doing it because it's of the inherent value within the scripture that's a connection to God. Doing things because it's a connection to God is seen as doing it as a mitzvah. And there's unique qualities to the Torah, that the Torah is the inheritance of the Jewish people, and the Torah is the betrothed of the Jewish people. There's qualities of the Torah for the Jew that increases the concern of a non-Jew doing Torah study as a mitzvah, simply for the sake of connection to God. Therefore, a Gentile who delves into Torah study that is to that extent is violating two prohibitions: the general prohibition of adding a commandment and the specific prohibition of learning Torah in such a depth that it is like having relations with a betrothed woman, a metaphor for the Torah, or stealing what belongs to someone else, the Jewish people. This is why the Talmud compares this level of Torah study to a capital sin. This comparison is relating only to the spiritual perspective, since the transgression is not punishable by a court of law. So on a spiritual level, there's a connection. This is seen as a much higher concern on a spiritual level than a person taking on some other mitzvah that he shouldn't be taking on, such as tefillin or mezuzah. Those are prohibited to the Gentile. However, the Torah study for its own sake has an extra amount, but this is a spiritual aspect. The courts would not necessarily be handling this. They might intervene and inform the person it's wrong, but there's no required punishment for the person for the courts. It appears that the prohibition of permission to learn Torah follows the general rule that was explained in chapter 3 above. For any Torah commandment that has a reason or benefit for a Gentile to perform, it is permitted for him to do. And therefore, he may also learn the details of its performance. And if it was a purely spiritual Jewish precept, it is prohibited for Gentiles to do. Likewise, in regarding to learning Torah, one who learns to obtain a benefit, like one who wants to know the logical societal laws as the Torah gives them, is permitted to learn the parts of Torah which are connected to this, like the books of damages in the Mishnah, or the section Koshan Mishpat in the Code of Jewish Law, the Shulchan Aruch. Since he is learning this for his own benefit, and he is certainly not learning Torah for its own sake, this is not called delving into Torah, and it is permitted. There is a tremendous amount of Torah, both in the written Torah and in the traditional, the oral Torah, That applies to regular people. Um, how to transact business, how to interact with other people, how to behave towards animals. You know, there's all sorts of things that are in the Torah that can apply to a non-Jew. These areas are permitted areas of study. Therefore, anyone who wishes to learn the Torah in order to perform the logical commandments such as honoring parents, returning lost objects, and giving charity, it is not forbidden to do so, because he wants to perform these righteous and upright actions and not as spiritual statues. Okay, so I understand that I should return lost objects. I'm not doing it as a commandment. I'm not doing it because I was commanded to do so. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. Therefore, I know that the Torah gives instructions on how to do this, and gives instructions on a wide range of areas. I can study the Torah in order to learn how to do these things correctly. Even if he only wants to learn the Torah in order to know the special distinctiveness of the Jewish people and their divine commandments, and does not want to perform the Jewish precepts or to study in consideration of conversion, this is not called delving into Torah, and that is not prohibited. Okay, so the motivation, in the case of returning lost items, the motivation is obvious. The person wants to return lost objects. It's the right thing to do. He looks in the Bible, looks in the Torah in order to learn how to do this properly. But what about something that he doesn't want? You know, what if he's going to learn about the special distinctiveness of the Jewish people, or he's going to learn about he's going to learn about tefillin, not for the purpose of doing the tefillin, not for the purpose of just learning it for the sake of learning it. He's going to learn it because he honestly wants to understand what all this is about. What's going on here? He wants to know how the pieces fit together, and he wants to know how he fits into the pieces. In order to know how he fits into the pieces, he has to get an overall knowledge of these things. So he's doing it for the purpose of understanding how it works, in order to, just for peace of mind. What are these boxes the Jews are putting on their heads? What's that all about? He wants peace of mind. He wants to learn. And therefore, he's learning it for that purpose. That is permitted. This is why Moses, our teacher, wrote the 5 books of Moses in 70 languages. This is in a midrash that Moses, he had the Bible, he wrote the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, in Hebrew, and then near the end of his life, he translated it and wrote translations of it in the 70 languages that existed at the time, in order to inform the Gentiles about the Torah, so that they would know the special distinctions of the Jews and the Torah they received from God. See Tractate Sota 35b and Maharad's Chayot there, as to how the Gentiles learned these translations by Moses of the written Torah. However, A Gentile who is involved in learning Torah for its own sake, as a divine commandment, is adding another commandment onto the 7 Noahide commandments, just as one who puts on tefillin, for which he has no personal benefit, and therefore is doing it only as a commandment of God, or one who observes the Sabbath for the sake of heaven, or fast on Yom Kippur as a divine commandment. So all such observances are forbidden for Gentiles. So the Gentile who does these things because he feels he was commanded. Now I know I know of some Gentiles who wear tefillin sometimes. They feel that there's a special energy flow. I don't exactly understand it, but they feel there's some benefit they're receiving from it. Now, many rabbis would say this is wrong, but they feel that there's a special benefit that they receive from it. And in these other examples, there are people that do these things because they see some manner of personal benefit from it. If it's being done as a commandment, it's forbidden. And it might even be forbidden because these particular items are understood to be, the benefit comes because it's a commandment. And therefore, if it's not a commandment, the benefit doesn't exist. Like the energy flow from tefillin may not exist if the person is not commanded to do it. It may that it exists because of the commandment. And also, there's understood to be, people will explain the benefits, the spiritual, not the wisdom of the Torah, but the spiritual connectedness that the person feels from the Torah. It may be that that's only because it's a commandment. If the person is commanded to do something, he does it, he receives that connection. And then there's benefits that come from that connection. So the benefits are dependent upon it being a commandment. So if there's no commandment, then there's not benefit. That's what it's talking about here. That one who observes the Sabbath for the sake of heaven, or fast on Yom Kippur is a divine commandment. All such observances are forbidden for Gentiles. This is what the Talmud refers to by saying that a Gentile who delves into Torah learning is reaching to a level of Torah that was betrothed only to the Jewish people and given as their exclusive possession, and he is liable to death by the hand of heaven. All of this is in accordance with the opinion of Rambam on this subject. It is also prohibited for a Jew to teach Torah to Gentiles in the canonized or Aramaic text. See Tractate Hagita 13. Either because of the inherent holiness of the Torah's Hebrew letters and the precise wording, or because they may cause others to err if they know how to read the original text, and as a result go on to give their own explanations and interpretations of the written or oral Torah. So now I've been in classes where the text is in Hebrew. The rabbi will read, and then he translates it into English and then teaches off the English. And he might describe some word in the text. Now I'm not gonna be able to go from that and say, hey, I know this Hebrew, and therefore I can come up with my own innovation. So I think this is involving someone who is deeply, not on the level I just described, but deeply teaching the Hebrew text. Maybe it's only Hebrew that the class is being taught in. And therefore the student is really going deeply into that Hebrew. That might be a concern. Maybe. I mean, you talk about the Hebrew letters and the precise wordings. You might be going into Kabbalah at this point, that we're not allowed to teach the Kabbalistic aspects of the letters. Concerning the person that might give their own exclamations or interpretations, I know people that have read the Bible in English only, with no Hebrew understanding at all, and they come up with their own ideas. So I'm not really sure how this works. This is an area that has to be explained a little bit more clearly as to what's being said here. But it's preferable that a person learns in his native language. There is a preference for that, and the type of learning that is allowed, with the possible exception of some sections of the Bible that will be explained in the later footnote, should be learned in a person's normal language, the language of his country, the language that he uses. That it's just because that connects more into the benefits that come from the learning. However, here we are mainly speaking about a sincere or pious Gentile who wants to learn Torah on his own in translated books. We can add that after the Torah was translated into Greek as a Septuagint, it is permitted to learn Torah in one's own language from a proper translation. So there's two areas where the Torah was given over in languages. The first time was with Moses, and then later with the Septuagint, where after that there was a spiritual occurrence that allows the Torah to be explained, to be translated in a proper manner, and therefore we can learn from the translated text. Thank you.